Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about the rise of corporations and big businesses in the industrial era of the United States. One of the big changes that we see during this period is the rise of the corporation model. This is a model in which ownership and management of a company are separated. So previously, you have someone who owns their own company. They are both the manager and the owner. They are responsible for everything that happens connected with that company. Corporations start to divide that responsibility. They divide that responsibility in order to raise money. So companies like railroads, the first big business of America, need a lot of money to buy the track, the locomotives, the rolling stock, and that they need to run these railroads. And once the railroads are up and running, they produce a profit. But in order to raise the money or to raise the capital to establish the railroad, what the company will do is sell shares to people who are otherwise uninvolved in the work of the company, offering them a share in the profits. And so this is a way to raise money for the company. Now, in the model of the corporation, those who have bought shares now determine a board of directors who in turn hire the management. And so this means that the management of a company is now influenced by those who own shares in the company. It also means that although the shareholders will benefit from any profits that the company turns in, they will not be liable for any debts that the company incurs. And this enables people to take more risks in starting new businesses. It enables businesses to be larger than they've been before. And I wanted to highlight a couple of examples of the really big businesses that develop in the United States in the second half of the 19th century. The first is the Rockefellers. John Rockefeller and his family become fabulously wealthy through the creation of an oil business. And the Rockefeller Oil Business acquires 90% of the market share of oil in the United States. That means of all the oil that's being produced, of all the money that comes from producing and selling oil, 90% of that was going to this company. And this was because the Rockefeller Corporation practiced both horizontal integration, which means that Rockefeller bought out less successful and less efficient competitors who were also selling oil, and also vertical integration, which means that he also gained more and more control over his supply chain and everything that was necessary to produce oil. So those are some fun business bonus terms to go along with your history class. Horizontal integration, you buy out your competitors who are trying to do the same thing as you. Vertical integration, you buy out those above and below you in the supply chain in order to have more control over your business. Another big business of this period is Carnegie Steel. Andrew Carnegie, like John Rockefeller, was born into poverty. He left school when he was 13, began working 12-hour days as what today would be an 8th grader. And he became the dominant producer of steel in the United States. Steel, which prior to the mid-19th century was very expensive to make, generally had to be imported into the United States. But Carnegie recognized that new inventions at the time would make it possible for steel to be developed in the United States much more cheaply and in much greater quantities. And he took advantage of this to create an enormous steel company that by 1900 was employing 20,000 workers. We're going to talk a little bit more about workers in a subsequent video, but just to give you an idea of the single-minded focus of these business owners. In Carnegie Steel Company, the factories never stopped, except on one day on the 4th of July, business would stop. But otherwise, there were 2 12-hour shifts and the factories ran constantly producing steel. And so it's for those who are working for this company, even Carnegie himself, their life is obsessed with work and with the production of steel. Even days like Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's Day, the factories would run in the same way that they would on any other day. Another very successful businessman during this period is Pierpont Morgan, founder of J.P. Morgan. Unlike Rockefeller and Carnegie, he comes from wealth. He becomes even more successful by developing an investment banking business that invests European money in American businesses. And this makes him very influential and very successful. So successful that in 1901, he establishes U.S. Steel Corporation. So basically, he takes control of Carnegie's business. And this is an even more huge corporation. It's the first billion-dollar corporation in history, and it employs 168,000 workers. So you can see that these businesses are growing and becoming incredibly successful in making money. What's an interesting part of this development, I said this week we're looking at social history, is that these powerful, wealthy businessmen, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, saw themselves as helping society by becoming this wealthy. There's a tendency, I think, and I think it's a natural one, to look at people making this amount of money and say, this is unnecessary. One person doesn't need to make this much money. One person doesn't need to control 90% of oil production. But these people saw themselves as furthering society. They saw society in an evolutionary progression, getting better and better. They saw themselves as the most efficient. That was borne out by the success of their businesses, and therefore that they were helping society by producing more money than someone else would, by replacing inefficient competitors. And they also saw part of the role of a wealthy person in the United States as to give to the society. And this is something that you see in American society, which I think it's fair to say is stronger than in other societies. That it's understood that Americans who are wealthy, who are successful, are going to give to the system that made them successful. And we see this with Rockefeller and Carnegie. Rockefeller gave away $500 million in his own lifetime. Carnegie founded thousands of libraries. This was seen as, in their minds, as part of the responsibility of being these leaders of civilization. So it's kind of interesting for us because on the one hand, we see these people becoming wealthier than perhaps it seems as though they need to be. And we see them controlling the lives of other people, controlling the industries, and we see them aggressively promoting wealth ahead of anything else. But we also see a certain amount of generosity. Now, how much of that is connected with sort of vanity projects, it's hard to say, but it's an interesting aspect of the creation of big American businesses that, as I say, I think is kind of uniquely American, at least at the time. But so you have a rising, wealthy upper class in American society. Now, by 1900, there are 4,000 millionaires in the United States. And you see accounts of these extravagant parties that are given in honor of the dogs of these wealthy people who receive necklaces worth thousands of dollars. You see people smoking cigarettes wrapped in $100 bills. The idea is that $100 is so meaningless to these people that they can just burn it up while they're smoking the cigarette or the cigar. We also see a growing middle class. What do we mean by middle class here? We mean salaried professionals. So accountants, doctors, lawyers. These professions are rising. They're stimulated by the fact that the businesses are bigger than ever before. They require someone like an accountant. They're also stimulated by the fact that the cities are bigger than ever before. The population is bigger than ever before. The supply of food is bigger than ever before. And therefore that supports a growing middle class, a growing segment of the population that doesn't have to grow its own food. And we also see a growing number of women working outside the home. So much so that by 1900, about a fifth of the female population of the United States was now no longer working exclusively as homemakers. They were still wives and mothers and raising families, many of them, but many of them also, they also have positions and employment outside the home. And so these are some of the ways in which American society is changing in the second half of the 19th century.